I hope you enjoyed those two short films. Your emotions were probably brought to a point of sentimentality as you watched that Apple commercial. And then maybe it's somewhat humorous to see all those people going wild in that second video. And I think what happens is what J.R.R. Tolkien talks about is that's the power of secondary belief. Now, when we talk about primary belief, that's something we watch, which we know is true. Maybe it's a documentary, maybe it's a newscast. But when we say something has the power of secondary belief, is that story is not true that you're watching. But because the plot is so good, the characters are so well defined, it brings you into the storyline as if it's true, and you laugh, you get emotional, you cry, you get excited. And that's what happened in that second clip. I often think of Christmas time when the movie It's a Wonderful Life is shown frequently. And my wife, when she watches that movie and it comes to the part where the uncle loses the money, she has to get up and leave because she just hates that movie. She's so drawn into it. Even though she knows what the end is going to be and it's all going to work out, she still has to leave. That's the power of what a really good story will do. And we call that secondary belief. And that's the power of a story. You see here in your books a quote by Sally Lloyd Jones, and it says, "A story can do more than teach you. A story can transform you. A story has power." Let me read you a little story that she wrote. She says, "People all have approached me," and she's a children's author, "holding up one of my children's books, flicking through it backwards." Now that's awful for a writer because it implies the words don't matter. "And cheerfully announcing, 'I'm going to do one.' I mean, really, how hard can it be?" Now, how many of us would dream up to going up to a surgeon and saying, "I'm going to do angioplasty"? I mean, really, how hard can it be? That people feel free to say this about children's books tells you a lot. Not so much of what they think of children's books writers. That's not important. It tells you what they think of children. I think it's because they don't have a high enough view of children. Our proper attitude before children should be humility. We need to be writing up to children, never down. And it tells you something else, that they have too low a view of story. What's the lesson in that story? Hey, what's the message? I'm often asked. But a story is not a sermon. As we writers know, we better not preach on that page. Our job is to tell a story, not teach a lesson. If we have an agenda, a message and code we want to get across, a moral we want to teach in our writings, it may be an excellent lecture, but it won't be a good story. It's too low of what a story is or what a story can do. A story can do more than teach you. A story can transform you. One Sunday, I was reading the story of Daniel and the scary sleepover to some 6-year-olds. One little girl in particular was sitting so close to me that she was almost in my lap. Her face was bright and eager as she listened to the story, utterly captivated. She could hardly keep on the ground and kept kneeling to get closer to the story. At the end of the story, there were no more teachers around, and I panicked and went into automatic pilot and heard myself saying, to my horror, asking, "And so what can we learn from Daniel and how God wants us to live?" And as I said those words, as if I had literally laid a huge load on that little girl, like I broke some spell, she crumpled right in front of me, physically slumping and bowing her head. I'll never forget it. It's what happens. It's a picture of what happens to a child when we turn a story into a sermon. We drill a Bible story down into a moral lesson. We make it all about us. But the Bible isn't mainly about us. It's what we're supposed to be doing. And what we're supposed to be doing is about God and what He's done through Jesus. When we tie up the story in a nice, neat little package and answer all the questions, we leave no room for mystery or discovery. We leave no room for the child, no room for God. Now, there may be things just above the children's heads. They may not know every word. They may not understand everything. But let the story do its work. Let the language weave its spell. And let the children do what they love doing best, standing on tiptoes. A Chinese proverb says, a bird doesn't sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. The power of a good story. As you'll learn throughout this lesson, we're not here to give you bullet points and memorize dialogue that you can engage somebody. No, we're here to teach you a story, the best story in all the world, and let the story do its power. In your lesson here, it says a good story has the power to move you, and a good story taps into our longings and desires. You see here in these little clips here, just a couple of ways that a story, some of it may not even true, can really move you. Your favorite movie or favorite book really moves you. What we're going to challenge you to do is become a master storyteller and let the story do its power because it's God's story. Now, as you break up into your small groups, I have 2 questions for you that I want you to discuss. Number 1, you share with your group your favorite movie and why. And then second of all, I want you to discuss the quote in your book by Sally Lloyd Jones. The quote, "A story can do more than teach you. A story can transform you." And maybe you want to discuss maybe a book you read or a movie that you watched and what that story told and how it really affected you or changed you. So enjoy your time discussing these 2 questions.